Hi everyone, welcome to our asynchronous session. I am your instructor, Mr. Rensis Dose from the Science Department, the College of Arts and Sciences, Guimaras State College. So our course is Green Technology Education 1, and it will cover the lesson 1, which is on the Introduction to Environmental Education. This video presentation aims to augment the printed modules that we are going to distribute to you. The module and together with this video presentation will provide the contents of environmental education in the Philippines, its objectives, history, and philosophy. It is hoped that this module and video presentation will help the students to effectively understand the need of green technology education to achieve the goals of the environmental education in their classrooms. Thus, at the end of this module, the students are expected to explain the goal, basis, and principle of environmental education as a platform of green technology education in the college, and at the same time to discuss the importance of environmental education to sustainable development. The next succeeding slides will present photos of environmental destructions. First set of photos will be the comparison of the two mountains with on the left rich in forestry and on the right portion here is a an example of kaingin farming in the Philippines, where we cut trees and change it with crops like corns and native rice. In this set of pictures, we can observe on the left side, the boy is experiencing a free and fresh oxygen. And on the right portion is a man with a plant on his back. Maybe because of the pollution or the pollutants that we usually produce, particularly in the industry or industrial wastes. This one is an example of melting of ice in the polar regions, causing with, of course, the rising of water in lowland areas. The last set of pictures showing a typhoon that is from the Pacific Ocean. And as what we observe here, we can observe the Philippines here experiencing these strong typhoons that may destroy our living and our source of income. Thus, with these effects that I've been showing to you, may add on the knowledge and the need of environmental education. Thus, environmental education is a process in which individuals gain awareness of their environment and usually to acquire knowledge, skills, values, experiences, and also the determination which will enable them or which enable us individually, collectively, to solve present and future environmental problems. By this, of course, environmental education will lead us into a good approach in dealing with environmental problems. so that we can produce a specific, a comprehensive plan in our future environmental problems, even in our present problems. Further, environmental education is a complex process covering not just events, but a strong underlying approach to society building as a whole. Environmental education provides people with the awareness needed to build partnerships, understand NGO activities, develop participatory approaches to urban planning, and ensure future markets for eco business. Why? Because nowadays we are with so many education, particularly in environmental education. But at the end of the day, we end up with nothing because we go to training, we attend seminars, but at the end of the day, we don't apply it in our real life situation. But again, this environmental education will provide everybody, particularly those students who are enrolled in the green technology education, to understand, okay, the specific environmental concerns, and in order for us to address the problem in the environment. We need to be aware in order for us to build partnerships with the government and at the same time with non-governmental organizations. And since the population in the urban areas are tend to increase, then therefore we must develop a participatory approach in urban planning. And of course, to ensure future markets for our eco business. Also, environmental education is a learning process that increases people's knowledge and awareness about the environment and associated challenges, develops the necessary skills and expertise to address the challenges, and foster attitudes, motivations, and commitments to make informed decisions and take responsible action on it. That is according to the UNESCO in the Tbilisi Declaration in 1978. So, what are the components of environmental education? One will be awareness and sensitivity to the environment and environmental challenges. Second, challenge and understanding of the environment and environmental challenges. Third, attitudes of concern for the environment and motivation to improve or maintain environmental quality. Fourth, to provide skills to identify and help resolve environmental challenges. And lastly, participation in activities that lead to the resolution of environmental challenges. So let me go back to the previous slide to explain further. First, awareness and sensitivity to the environment and environmental challenges. Once we have this environmental education, we will be aware and sensitive to the environment and environmental challenges. Just like, for example, just a simple activity in our home, in our respective homes. Just like we segregate non-biodegradable from biodegradable wastes. Okay? Since we are educated inside the classroom, we must be sensitive of the waste that we are going to throw in the environment. We all know that environmental degradation is happening because of these waste materials. First, of course, plastics. Okay? So we all know that plastics cannot be degraded in a span of 1 year, but 50 years or 100 years before it will degrade. So by having environmental education, we will be aware of the waste materials that we actually produce and later on be sensitive in the environment. Second, challenge and understanding of the environment and environmental challenges. By environmental education or through environmental education, we gain knowledge and understand the normal flow of energy in the environment or the normal movements of chemicals in the environment, or let's say understanding the concepts of science in our environment. Third, attitude. We need to learn and at the same time to develop an attitude in, in concern with the environment so that it will motivate us to improve or maintain environmental quality or the environmental balance. By having environmental education, we can gain knowledge and develop a specific skills to identify and help resolving environmental challenges. Like for example, we are planting trees because we wanted to help the environment to maintain the normal level of oxygen. Or maybe we are trying to plant mangroves in our coastal areas for the fishes to reproduce and leave their juvenile stay in the meantime. And if they are now ready to go to the ocean, at least we have sources of food for our increasing population. And by engaging in the environmental education, we participate in various activities that lead to the resolution of the environmental challenges, like tree planting, like coastal cleanup, or even a simple act in our homes, segregating biodegradable from non-biodegradable materials, or maybe not burning agricultural wastes or household waste that might add on in the degradation of our environmental balance. Environmental education is aimed at producing a citizenry that is knowledgeable concerning the biophysical environment and its associated problems, and also aware of how to help solve these problems and motivated to work toward their solution. So what are the bases of environmental education in the Philippines? We have the Republic Act number 9512, which is an act to promote environmental awareness through environmental education and for other purposes. And it is known as the National Environmental Awareness and Education Act of 2008 and was approved December 12, 2008. And so, what this act is all about. So in the section 2, it is in the declaration of policy, the consistent with the policy of the state to protect, and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. In the Section 5, Declaration of Environmental Awareness Month, in pursuant to the policy set forth in this Act, the month of November of every year shall be known as the Environmental Awareness Month throughout the Philippines. In the Section 10, Effectivity, this act shall take effect 15 days after its publication in the official gazette or in at least two newspapers of general circulation. So this act, which is a consolidation of Senate Bill number 1699 and House Bill number 4381, was finally passed by the Senate and the House of Representatives on October 8, 2008. Now, let's talk about the environmental principles. So, these environmental principles will provide us a specific knowledge of the interrelatedness of the environment and the people. Okay? So first, environmental principle is nature knows best. Because all processes in the environment are important to maintain the so-called balance. So cyclic flow of materials or nutrients in the ecosystem is very important to maintain life. Like for example, this one is an example of a anabolic reaction, which is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the production of food by our plants. Okay? Wherein this carbon dioxide combined with water with the presence of sunlight as a source of energy, it will produce a sugar or a glucose, the C6H12O6, and oxygen for us to inhale. Also, we should have balance, like for example, the normal cyclic flow of materials in the environment known as the biogeochemical cycles. And we will be discussing this biogeochemical cycles on the succeeding topics. That means here the first environmental principle, nature knows best. That means our nature know how to balance it. But the problem is that nature cannot balance everything if we human beings accelerate the production of carbon dioxide, for example, because of the industry, waste materials, pesticides that we usually put in our farmlands. So nature cannot maintain this balance if we accelerate production of these things that might destroy our environment. So the cyclic flow of materials or nutrients usually happens when in the environment, okay, there is a presence of 78% nitrogen in our atmosphere, and this 78% nitrogen in the atmosphere cannot be assimilated by plants. This needs, of course, a specific process, okay? A specific process for the plants to use this nitrogen from the atmosphere. So let's say there is a process. So it will be converted to plant proteins if the plants are already assimilated the nitrogen. And these proteins of plant will be deposited in the parts of the plants where animals and humans eat and utilize these plant parts containing plant proteins with nitrogen. Once the animal and the humans eaten these plant parts with proteins or containing nitrogen, then therefore they will use it as energy and other needed materials to produce a specific proteins for animals and plants. Once these animals and plants die, it will be decomposed and degraded, and it will go back to the environment. And this is usually the normal flow or normal cyclic flow of materials or nutrients in our environment. These things here are very important. Once there is a destruction or imbalance, for example, in this portion, in converting converting nitrogen into usable materials for the plants to assimilate, it will disrupt the normal flow. It will disrupt the normal balance of our environment. So a simple or a minute activity that might affect the balance will later on give a large impact in the environment, because once there is destruction in the normal flow, it will cause a domino effect. One example of disrupting the balance in the environment is by burning of waste, particularly burning of waste materials in our farmlands or even our backyards. Burning of waste, most of organic compounds are released to atmosphere, and thus decomposers will not be able to break down immediately, resulting to the delay of in the return of nutrients in the environment. That means the carbon supposed to be will be direct to the soil. Because we burn it, it changed into its gaseous state and go to the atmosphere first and go to the soil. So that means it will delay the return of carbon from the plant or decomposed parts of the plants or animals going to the soil for richer soil and for the plants to grow. Thus, because of that delay, it will, of course, produce a domino effect to our environment. Another example, burning of farm wastes instead of allowing them to decompose naturally will disrupt the cycle. Why? Because again, that carbon will be converted into its gaseous state and later on go to the atmosphere. And it will delay because supposed to be it will go to the soil directly once decomposed. Thus, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources passed, of course, the law, which is the anti-burning law. Burning of leaves and waste materials is prohibited. So the DNR bans backyard burning of garbage, and it is a crime. Remember that. There is a penalty, a fine of 300 pesos to 1,000, or imprisonment of 1 to 15 days. So the law states that burning leaves and wastes is harmful to one's health. Leaf and waste burning releases several poisons in the environment. So thus, harmful to one's health. So that means, hindi na kamo magtutod sa inyo nga mga waste materials sa inyo balay. Allow it to decompose, especially if it's biodegradable lang naman. Another, carbon dioxide and oxygen cycle, the normal cycle. Usually, this illustration shows the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. So the animals and the animals and humans produce carbon dioxide as their waste material as they exhale. And this carbon dioxide will be used up by the plants for photosynthesis. In exchange, of course, the plants will produce oxygen for us to inhale. So this is a normal cycle of our environment. The exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. But here are the activities that will affect the balance of the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between animals and plants. Excessive cutting of trees without replacement disrupts the cycle. Okay? Let's say, for example, you have trees nga ibaligya, so dapat kinanglan siya or i-cut kag ibaligya, and then you will use it for furnitures. You must replace it so that it will not usually gives us a disruption in the cycle. Trees are considered as lungs of the earth because it absorbs carbon dioxide needed for photosynthesis. So increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere absorbs heat and will result to increase of the environmental temperature. Then later on it will cause global warming. 3. Use of plastics in the environment. Plastics are non-biodegradable, remember. Litter and the land and clog the drainage, streams, and rivers, causing flood. So even plastic is buried, it will not make soil fertile. So as what you observe in this illustration, this is actually by the UN. We can observe here that plastics usually how many years to break down, how long these plastics or trash to break down. So as what observe here, your plastic here, your how many years? 600 years, 500 to 1,000 years. Plastic bottle, okay, we have 1 million years. See how these trash, how these plastics stay in our environment. Also, we have here, we can observe that this bird died because of what this bird eats, diba? Here is the stomach of the bird with full of plastics. This one is actually a rescue operation of the team of veterinarians born to be wild, wherein this plastic straw found in the nose of the pawikan. See the effect. It's detrimental. As what we observe here, plastic pollution is growing. As what we observe, number 1 is China and number 3 is the Philippines. This survey is about 2010. In the 2020, we can observe the increase of plastic production. This is actually from the climate desk. Also, throwing of toxic waste in the bodies of water will kill large aquatic organisms, will kill decomposers that play an important role in breaking down materials to reuse again. As what we observe in the picture, the body of this turtle was deformed already because of this plastic on its body. So, some effects of pollution in water here clog our drainage, our river, our streams. It cause the dying of fishes in the area, and at the same time, if ever we can intake water or a water with the microplastics, it is very detrimental to us, and we can we can observe here the cyanobacteria that increasing in the water that may cause, of course, a lower oxygen level and causing the death of fishes. And at the same time, increase the level of chemicals in water like mercury, phosphate, and nitrate, which is very toxic to human beings. Also, chemical fertilizers. High rate of chemical fertilizers increase the acidity of the soil. Once the soil is acidic, wala na sang may matubo na da. So, through time may cause some nutrients to be unavailable to plants, making the soil infertile. That's why kung wala na siya sang materials na dira, and because it is acidic, wala sang may matubo uh, nga plants sa specific nga area nga na. Chemical fertilizers can pollute a bodies of water. And in some algal blooms in the Philippines are attributed to inorganic fertilizers containing nitrates. So, ginatawag natin nga algal blooms. Example is that nga the greening of the water resources. Ginatawag na naton nga algal blooms or eutrophication. Also, normal flow interaction between food web. So, will cause the increase of prey population uncontrollably, causing imbalance in food web. For example, excessive deforestation in Mindanao, causing the migration of predators of rodents like owls and snakes. So, for example, excessive deforestation will, of course, cause our owls and snakes to migrate in a richer forest area. Thus, if these predators of rodents migrate or increase in migration to another area, the rodents in that portion will increase its population. And we all know that these rodents are able to destroy our farmlands, our palayan. Then therefore, it will affect our source of living. And as what I've said, increase of rodents will destroy the crops in nearby farms. Another environmental principle, the environmental principle number 2, that all forms of life are important. All living things or organisms were created by God to serve a purpose. It should be respected as they all part of food web of life. Each individual is a part of a food chain, and the removal of one will upset eating process and may cause the extinction of another organism which feed on it. And that is why what I am telling you in our previous slides, it will cause a domino effect. Each individual is part of the food chain. For example, if that individual organism or animal is part of the food chain, once you remove that, what will happen then to the predator of that animal? Of course, it will upset the eating process, and may cause to that particular predator to die. And the effect maybe later on if will increase extinction of that organism. Once you exclude or you remove that organism in the environment, expect that there will be a change in the balance. Okay? Next, environmental principle number 3. This environmental principle number 3, everything is related to everything else. So possible interactions in the ecosystem is between living and the non-living factors, or the biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic, that means living factors. Abiotic, that means non-living factors. Also, there will be interaction between two living factors, biotic. And the third interaction is that interaction between non-living factors, both abiotic factors. So with these three possible interactions in the ecosystem will lead us, of course, to the third environmental principle, that everything is related to everything else. For example, lake ecosystem. Aside from food relationship between and physical-chemical factors involved, it is also influenced by terrestrial environment and that surrounds it. If inorganic fertilizers applied in the crop land near the lake, there will be eutrophication. This eutrophication is a process by which body of water is enriched of phosphates and nitrates that will stimulate the growth of aquatic plants. And since the growth of aquatic plants tend to increase, they will need um, carbon dioxide. And of course, once there is an increase of these plants, there is always a um, production of waste materials, and at the same time, there are instances nga nagakalamatay man ang plants. And ang parts ng plants nga na nagaka-decompose. Once it will decompose, then therefore, what will happen? It will be degraded by the microorganisms, and these microorganisms will need carbon dioxide also in degrading such parts of the plants. Then therefore, what will happen? It will need uh, oxygen in degradation. Once most of the microorganisms use oxygen in the water, it will decrease specifically the dissolved oxygen, causing, of course, the destruction of life in water, causing the death of aquatic plants present in that area. So this is an example of eutrophication. Observe that there is a greening of water, wherein we can say that there is an increase of algal blooms or algae in the water. Also, vehicles emission of gas that cause pollution that increase the incidence of respiratory illness. Household release sewage into the bodies of water that pollute it, causing many aquatic organisms to die and chronic health problems to people. I would like to focus in the chronic health problems of the people, to the people. There are also examples like increase of the incidence of parasitic worms, especially those areas near the coastal barangays of a specific town or of a specific city, because they don't have a specific area for defecation. So, ginahambal nila, basin diin lang. Okay. Basin diin lang sila. Like, for example, in the squatters area, they don't have specific area for their waste materials. Like, for example, they don't have septic tanks. So, of course, we all know that septic tanks is very important because kung pabayaan na naton nga wala sa septic tank ang aton waste products, what will happen is that it will increase the incidence of water contamination or E. coli contamination and coliform contamination in our water. And at the same time, if there is a presence of intestinal worms or intestinal parasites, it will cause later on to this community, increasing the incidence of these intestinal worms. Also, use of CFCs leads to ozone depletion that increase the incidence of skin cancer. So, too much exposure to UV light will cause skin cancer, especially if your skin is fairer, okay, or white skin. And we all know that ozone layer is a layer of the atmosphere that screens the harmful ultraviolet radiation that may strike on the surface of the earth. Next, we have environmental principle number 4, which is changes. We all know that the only permanent in this world is change. So we have types of natural changes. We have the linear change, cyclic, random change. So, linear change, this is Earth from ball, dust, and gas, from a simple particle to a larger Earth. That's a linear change. Cyclic change, for example, is a movement of Earth as astronomical body results in the occurrence of seasons and days and nights. Cyclic, that means balik-balik lang. Okay? And it's normal. Also a change, random. This is due to catastrophic forces like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunami, and typhoons. But remember, human activities bringing about change is that lifestyle change like new technologies, which is we are enjoying as of the moment, our cell phone, our laptop, our signals. These are technologies that are in application in education. That's why we have this one session because of the technology. And it is usually accompanied by materialistic values. There are also cultural change cause destruction to environment, like forest and destruction of the coral reef. Cultural change because, for example, we tend to destroy our forest in exchange of, for example, in exchange of subdivisions, in exchange of uh, parks. We also destroy our coral reef in exchange of dolomite mining, which has been controversial at this moment in Cebu. Okay? Because siltation will tend to go to the coral reefs in Cebu, covering the coral reefs and destroying these coral reefs. Okay? So we all know that these are cultural changes. Environmental principle number 5, where everything must go somewhere. So it must go somewhere. Okay? All of our waste materials will go somewhere. Okay? So that's why we must have to adopt 3 R's for proper waste management: reduction, reutilization, and recycling. And I guess these 3 are said to be gas already from your elementary, going to your high school, going to your senior high school. You've discussed these 3 R's. And I don't want to elaborate it here. So what are the thoughts on waste segregation? So of course, through educational campaign or thorough educational campaign must accompany the program. We must have an educational campaign, and environmental education must be in the program. In planning the program, it must be considered the destination of different kinds of waste. For example, in planning the program, we must have our MRF. All the recyclable materials must go to the MRF to be segregated into a um, specific purpose. Like for example, biodegradable materials must go to the compost pit. Recyclable materials must go to the MRF. Maybe we can use it for recycling. Third, some waste may need further segregation, and the fate of segregation waste should be determined. So sa diin na siya ayhan makadto, it should be determined. So just like for example, in my previous class, okay, at Pasig City College and at the same time at West Visayas State University, Calinog Campus, in our ecology class, we develop an area into a eco park, and this eco park contains recyclable materials and reusable materials. And at the same time, in that eco park, it projects the use of non-biodegradable materials as designs in our park. And at the same time, it offer an area where education regarding with plants name, and at the same time the usefulness, I mean, of these herbal plants. And at the same time, the main purpose of this activity, of this output of my students, is to promote um, environmental awareness. Another, here is the project. One project of my ecology class, my BE Ed 4 students, last 2017-2018, they made a specific video presentation pertaining to their environmental advocacy. And this environmental advocacy was uploaded in the Facebook and in YouTube to educate other students, and at the same time our citizens, for the effects of environmental education, and at the same time effects of pollutions in our environment and directly to us human beings. So how to segregate our garbage? For example, we segregate food, and this food may be used to feed our chicken, for example, our dog. Okay, compost, to be feed compost worms to produce fertilizer, pwede. Compost to be buried in the ground and left there and use it for our plants later on. Because now in this time of pandemic, there are developments of plantitas and plantitos. So we can use that as our medium for our plant and have money for the plants. But remember, these plants must be propagated in your backyards, not being isolated from the environment, like those of endangered plant species. Okay, Don't remove that in their physical environment, in their specific environment, or in their flora. Also, we segregate non-biodegradable but reusable, non-biodegradable but recyclable materials, cans, bottles, and papers. The sixth environmental principle is the finiteness of resources. Remember, finiteness, that means may hangganan. All of our resources may hangganan. Then therefore, we need to conserve these resources. Let us protect, not to destroy these resources of ours. Limit the Earth's capacity. So there is a finiteness in the Earth's capacity. So the amount of life that Earth can support is limited. Okay? Limit the Earth's absorptive capacity. So the ability of the Earth to assimilate its waste products. That is why hagan-haganon naton ang pag-produce sang waste materials. Limits to Earth's supply. Supply of food, supply of natural materials, supply of water, these are limited. So that is why we need to conserve. Like for example, conserve groundwater. Okay, later on, if this groundwater maubos na, wala na ta pwede inumon. If these resources madula na, wala na ta sang gamiton. Economic value, of course, there is a limit in economic value, limits of overtime, and limits to the distribution of resources. So everything has its finiteness, has its end. So that is why, especially natural resources, should be take care, should be taken care of the government and of course of all of us. Environmental principle number 7, nature is beautiful and be aware, or be aware of these. We are stewards of God's creation. Humans are the only one made by God's image and have been given the right to have dominion over all his creations. Then therefore, we are the one that control, the most intelligent and gifted with reasons, capable of manipulating creation to their own advantage. Humans cannot exist without nature. They are co-eternal with the environment they lived in. This is very important, that we need to understand that nature is beautiful and we are stewards of God's creation. God made us to be over all of his creations and to control over his creations. Because we are intelligent, we are gifted with reasons, capable of manipulating creation to their own advantage. Thus, lust and greed is not good. Remember, we are on top of the food web. We are on top of the pyramid. We are on top of all creations. Thus, our purpose is to protect these things, not to exploit these things. Remember, once we exploit, once we destroy, there will be a negative effect that may go back to all of us. Remember, nature can exist without human beings, but human beings cannot exist without nature. We are the one who will protect our nature. We have only one earth to protect. Thus, we need to act now. Okay, as we know already the basic principles in the environment, we will focus now on the sustainable development. When we say sustainable, that means it should be sustained in a longer span of time. So, sustainable development is the overarching paradigm of the United Nations. So, the concept of sustainable development was described by the 1987 Brundtland Commission report as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And we have four dimensions to sustainable development: the society, environment, culture, and economy, which are intertwined, not separated. They are all connected: the society, the environment, our culture, and our economy. So, sustainability is a paradigm for thinking about the future in which environmental, societal, and economic considerations are balanced in the pursuit of an improved quality of life. So, for example, a prosperous society relies on a healthy environment to provide food and resources, safe drinking water, and clean air for its citizens. Like we have the sustainable environment, and we have a prosperous society because we have a healthy population. We have a sufficient food and resources for our needs. And we have water to drink and clean air for us. So that is an example of a sustainable environment. That is why later on I will discuss more on it in the application. Sustainability is often thought of as long-term goal. For example, a more sustainable world, a longer effect, while sustainable development refers to the many processes and pathways to achieve it. Sustainable agriculture, for example, a longer application of agriculture and forestry in our area, sustainable production, or a longer production and consumption, a sustainable government that can sustain through the years, research and technology transfer, education, and training. So this sustainability is applicable to all, even in the government. So in this portion here, we can observe that sustainability in the social, respect for the individual, equality, opportunity, equal. That means kita tanan equal. Kung ano ang ginakaon niya, amo man ang ginakaon mo. Okay? Kung ano ang na-receive mo, amo man ang na-receive mo. Like for example, the SAP. Diba? Kung ano ginhatag sa iya, dapat amo man ang nakuha mo. If you are in the same level. Okay? Diversity, outreach programs, and human rights. Usually, in social aspects, we have an integrated approach to our human rights. Okay? To protect our rights as human beings. Also, for environment, okay? Usually, permit and license compliance, biodiversity management, emission to air, water chemical usage and discharge. These are for environmental concepts. For eco-economy, it is sharing between the economic and the environmental. Your socio-economic with the social aspects and the economy, and at the same time socio-environmental, like health and safety of human beings, like for example the protection of each member of the community in this pandemic, wearing of we must have a sustainable plan in fighting this pandemic. Like for example, budget for health, okay? And like now, in 2021, we have lesser budget in health. It seems that we don't have a pandemic, okay? So also, these areas here that are actually interrelated. As what I've said, the environmental, the social, and the economic are interrelated in order for us to a holistic approach in the sustainable development of our society. Okay, so elements and dimensions, parameters of sustainable development. First, we have economic. Maintaining a sustainable population. When we say sustainable population, we have an equal number of an old age and a working group. For example, um, in Canada, they are allowing migration because the number of their population, or the number of their old age population, are much higher than their working population. That is why they cannot sustain, they cannot really sustain the economy if they will allow that nga magtaas lang nga magtaas ang ilang nga specific nga old age number nga population. So dapat ma-maintain may working community, working community gid sila, or working population, which is the age of course from 21 as sa 40 na. Also maintaining productivity and profitability of environment and natural resources. That is why I believe in the advocacy of Gina Lopez before, the late Gina Lopez, the former DNR secretary, but unfortunately, um, the the appointing body did not appoint or confirm, the confirming body did not confirm the DNR secretary, maybe because of of some other reasons. But I believe with the advocacy of the late Gina Lopez pertaining to the balanced economy using environment and our natural resources. The ecotourism. If we opted to an ecotourism or agri ecotourism, usually we can maintain the economy because if because in the first place, our natural resources, our primary source, right, in the Philippines. So if we will develop it, and by protecting our environment, we can call tourists to come and visit our eco tourism spots. So of course it will add on into our economy. So that's the big application of environment and natural resources. Not by mining kay tungod nga ga-produce kita sa amoni, o gahatag kita to, gakwa kita sang kwarta para economy ta. Pero pwede kita ka-maintain sang aton economy using our natural resources, using our environmental resources, using of course the ecotourism, and which is very large profit actually na siya for the Philippines. But because some are against of it, then therefore wala to sa napadayon. And that is the advocacy of Gina Lopez at the time. Next, we have ecological. Adopting environmental management, weapons in policy and decision making. So we must have a policy, and we have a decision making body in protecting our environment. Once we destroy our environment, it will provide us a domino effect again. Once na destroy, syempre apektado ang health. Apektado man gihapon ang aton nga economy. Kay wala na sang may wala na sa may ginatawag nga nagaprotect sa aton tawo, ginamasakit na aton nga tawo. Paano pa sila kaobra? Kung wala sa may maobra, wala kwarta. Kung wala sa kwarta, guba economy ta. Okay? So, remember that ecological aspects, let's say, once there is a destruction of our environment, of our ecology, then therefore, may effect yun na sa tao. Let's say, for example, ang ara to sa China, the pandemic, di ba? Kung wala ta naging tugdaan, kung wala ta na siya ging tugdaan ang mga animals nga available in the environment, nga dapat hindi naton pagdalon sa balay, hindi naton pag-handle ang mga exotic nga mga animals nga na wala ta tani naka-contact sa specific nga virus nga para lang sa ila. Kay since it is a virus, it can mutate. And once it mutate, it can adopt with other hosts or within the other hosts, particularly, of course, human beings. Now, here comes the SARS-CoV-2. Diba? Because kintugdaan ta ang ara sa environment. Kay kung wala na nato tani ginatugdaan sila dira sa ilalan ang masakit nga na, wala na nag-transfer sa aton. Okay? And that is my point in ecological balance. We must have environmental management and we have a decision-making body in this ecological aspects. I believe as a biology graduate and master in biology and a science-inclined in person, I believe with sustainable living, using with a good environmental management and by protecting our environment. It will be sustainable approach if we opted to protect our environment. Protecting the environment and conserving natural resources. Amoy ng punto ta. Dapat kinanglan tayo iprotektahan ang aton environment and natural resources. Kaya because in our natural resources, we can obtain medicine there. Just like, for example, what I have learned from my master's degree, that there are sediments, there are microorganisms present in the seafloor that can cure cancer. And that is one project or a research project of an Ilongga scientist, a balik scientist funded by the DOST from America. And she is actually the present dean of the College of Pharmacy in the University of San Agustin in Iloilo. And her research is focused on the metabolites produced by a specific microorganism isolated from the seafloor and has a potential to cure cancer. So that means once we take good care of our environment, we can discover things, microorganisms, living organisms that produce specific metabolites that can cure our illness and can make our life much healthier. But by distracting or destruction of our environment, this potential source of medicine for us, for to become a healthy population, will diminish. Okay? Now, next, proceed in technological aspects, promoting proper management of waste and residuals, and adopting environment-friendly technologies. That is why in our succeeding lessons in green technology education, we will be talking about more on the technologies that are environmentally friendly or green technologies. Okay? Also, we have political, empowering the people, not over the people. Okay? In political, we maintain peace and order. Okay? But not militarization. But we need to maintain a peace and order by giving laws, providing laws, and by attending the needs of the people. There will be no quarrel at all if greed will be disregarded or will remove in the context of political aspects, in our political aspects. But in our present situation, we are experiencing greed. I am not accusing everybody in the politics. But of course, what happens to the Philippines if we have very honest politicians? That's the big question of Miriam Defensor Santiago that time. They are claiming that they are good enough. But why still the Philippines are listed in the top most corrupt country? See? That's a big question. If our politicians or if we government officials and if we people are said to be honest, then therefore we have a better Philippines. Okay? But of course, this is all through a collaborative effort. Now, we have socio-cultural. In socio-cultural, we promote resources, access, and upholding property rights. Okay? And promoting environmental awareness in inculcating environmental ethics and supporting environmental management action. Ang question, why is it other countries maintain their environmental management? Why is it nga manami man ang ilang environment? Nga man ang aton di polluted. Like in Japan. Because it is inculcated already in their culture. As ang ginawi nila. Unlike sa aton niya, mas hindi ka di haboy ka sa basura. Like for example, ang pinakasimple lang na gani, nga ang imo nga plastic sa imo dulce, ihaboy mo pa sa dalan. Kung nga ang ibutang mo lang sa bag mo, kay haboy ito sa insyaktong halabuyan. Diba? Ay yung basura, sa di naman ginahaboy ang basura nga na. Wala gani na segregate ang basura. Even elementary students or pupils know how to segregate. How much more college students? How much more these adults? Diba? That is actually bicultural. Now, let's talk about institutional. Improving institutional capacity to manage sustainable development. Like we have in Guimaras State College, you must have an institutional sustainability plan. And I am much proud that we belong in Guimaras State College, which is the second in the Philippines accredited as an institutional sustainability. Okay, sustainable. The ISA accreditation. So that means we have our sustainable plans for our institution. The first in Western Visayas, in the Visayas, and the second in the Philippines. Now, let's talk about key actors in sustainable development. So, who are these actors? Number one, of course, we have the government. The government is the key actor in the policy, which is concerned with democratic governance and security of human rights. The government must act for the policy. Of course, sino sundon ta? Gobyerno ta. Of course, we will follow the government. They have the policy, and we will follow the policy as long as the policy is correct. Okay? It's like, for example, they have the policy in the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, wherein the Manila Bay, amo na pinakabag usubong mo, diba? We have the Manila Bay. So we call for a sustainable plan that can answer the problem, not by dumping dolomite, not by dumping alone the white sand there. Is it sustainable? Dugay bala na siya? Kag manami balang epekto? So far, wala pa nang ganing natuigan. Wala pa nang ganing pila ka bulan. Amat-amat na siya kaagnas ang white sand. Diba? That is my point. That is the point that the government is the key actor in policy making. Dapat may policy making which is sustainable again because we're talking with sustainable development. How is it sustainable if after a strong waves there, it will destroy hundreds of millions kaging gasto mo dira. 'Di ba? So that's the main point. But there are some individuals that are having fun of it and ginadayaw man gihapon. Pero ang ginapangayon naton is that nga sustainable development. It should be sustainable. Hindi siya nga sangkahangin mo lang, wala na siya. So paano naging sustainable ina siya? 'Di ba? Civil society is the key actor in culture, so which is concerned with the development of social and spiritual capacities of human beings sa culture itself. In business is the key actor in the economy. Kay kinahanglan ta magbakal, kinahanglan naton magamit sang aton nga mga produkto para balance. So, the business mainly concerned with producing goods and services to the people. Okay? To maintain a good economy, dapat may gabakal, di ba? Dapat may nagagamit sang goods, may nagagamit sang serbisyo. Okay? To maintain a normal economy, a sustaining economy. Anyway, here in the Philippines, we actually have that a good economy. But there's now in this time of pandemic, so tanan malangga suffer. Okay? But of course, we can recover if we have approach is holistic in answering the problem. Initiatives for sustainable development to happen, the world of nation agreed to focus all development initiative towards sustainability of resources. So that's in the Stockholm Convention held in last 30 years ago, while the whole world agreed on the urgent need to respond to the problem of environmental deterioration. Admitted nga tanan gid man nga countries nga may there is an environmental deterioration. So therefore, kung may environmental deterioration, dapat i-address ta na siya. Kay gani, hambal ko kagina, it's a domino effect. So we have the road to Rio. Okay? The publication of Our Common Future by the UN World Commission on Environment and Development in 1987, publication of the Brundtland report, a landmark report establishing the need for the sustainable development in industrialized and developing countries. An Earth Summit, officially known as the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, was held in June 1992. Wala pa ko natawo. At Rio de Janeiro and participated by over 170 states worldwide, 114 of whom were represented by heads of states of governments. Outcomes of the Earth Summit in 1992. Convention on Biodiversity. They convened regarding with our biodiversity. Okay? We have the rich biodiversity on Earth, especially in Africa, especially here in the Philippines, di ba? We have rich biodiversity here. So dapat mag-join kita. I guess nag-join din kita. Framework Convention on Climate Change. They accepted already that the concept that there is climate change. Okay? Principles of forest management. We must manage our forest. Kaya habal natin kagina gani, the trees are lungs of the earth. Okay? So the Agenda 21 in Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, it was agreed that the protection of the environment and the social and economic development are fundamental to sustainable development. Okay? So that means dapat protektahan nato ng aton environment, social and economic environment, and social and economic development for a sustainable development. To achieve such development, the Global Program Agenda 21 and the Rio Declaration to reaffirm global commitment were adopted. In Agenda 21, localized based on the maximum think globally, act locally through our Philippine Agenda 21. Act locally, think globally. We must think globally, but we act locally. Okay. Monetary Conference on Finance for Development. Monterey Conference on Finance for Development. Doha Ministerial Conference, which defined for the world a comprehensive vision for the future of humanity. That is an initiatives being acted for sustainable development. World Summit on Sustainable Development held in Johannesburg Johannesburg, South Africa from 2 to 4 September of 2002. These are initiatives in sustainable development. How about in the Philippines? In our own national agenda for sustainable development, we recognize three key actors in sustainable development and their roles in different realms of society. The principles of unity, okay, the action agenda, and the implementation strategies. The Philippine Agenda 21 envisions a better quality of life for all through the development of a just, moral, creative, spiritual, economically vibrant, caring, diverse, meaning damo, yet cohesive society characterized by appropriate productivity, participatory, and democratic processes, and living in harmony within the limits of the carrying capacity of nature and integrity of creation. So meaning interconnected di sila tanan-tanan. So what's in the Philippine Agenda 21? Primacy of developing full human potential. This puts man at the center of all development efforts. Tanan, dapat tabo. Diba? Kita tanan. Holistic science and appropriate technology implies development of appropriate technology to solve development problems with due consideration to its impact to society and ecology. That means holistic approach of science. We must address science and appropriate technology in our sustainable development. Of course, we need to accept that there is already a technology to make our life easier and at the same time to make our works faster. Cultural, moral, and spiritual sensitivity considers the inherent strength of local and indigenous knowledge. That is why we have IPs, practices, and beliefs while respecting cultural diversity. Okay? Moral standards in the spiritual nature of Filipino society. Self-determination. It requires respecting the rights and capabilities of the people and nation to decide on the course of their development. Dapat kadepende sa irespekta ang rights and capabilities of everyone. National sovereignty, self-determination at the national level to pursue social, ecological concerns in its governance to achieve human and environmental and food security. So dapat ang ato national government nagapangita sang paagi sini diri. Anyway, ginaubra man na nila, but not actually to the extent na experience ta subong. Gender sensitivity. We must be sensitive about the gender. We recognize the importance of complementary roles and empowerment of both women and men in the development. But actually, the gender sensitivity here is just limited to women and men. But how about other? We have diverse genders, right? But I guess we need to change this concept nga halin sa babae kag lalaki lang sa gender sensitivity. But of course, other diverse genders. Peace, order, and national unity. Make sure that the rights of everyone to a peaceful and secure existence is respected. Yes, your own rights. Social justice, inter and intra-generational equity, and spatial equity. Equal distribution of resources to everyone, including future generations. That is why we will not destroy our environment nga kita lang nag-enjoy. Dapat nakapreserve na nga sila man maka-enjoy ang mga future generations. And the provisions of equal access to development opportunities and benefits of all. Participatory democracy. We are democratic. It puts value and support to the participation of all in the decision-making process. It should not be limited on the government only, but of course other members or other stakeholders, because we are democratic. Institutional viability. Since SD, okay, sustainable development is everyone's concern, institutional structure should promote joint responsibility, unity, and partnership among all roles. Tanan nga institution, educational institution, business institutions, okay, should have partnership with it. National, non-governmental organizations should part of it. Okay, dapat viable na siya. Viable, sound, and broad-based economic development. It requires working for development that is based on stable economy where everyone equally shares the benefit of progress. So, what are the environmental concerns of industries? Use of natural resources that deplete scarce or non-renewable natural resources like the oils. Diba? Kung wala na tayo oil sa ulihi, maano kita? Okay? Process byproducts and waste that result in air, water, and land degradation. Waste products like too much carbon dioxide, chemical waste that are produced in the that are released in the environment. I mean, like for example, we are talking with the Manila Bay as of now, diba? May go ang Manila Bay. Di naghalin ayhan. So, dapat pangitaon kung sa diin na naghalin, kag dito na naon. Hindi nga dito kita ya sa last portion ang kaladtuan sang tanan nga higko. In the sustainable development, dapat dito kita sa puno matirada. Agud to, hindi siya waste of time, money, and effort sa pagsalo lang nakawala na untat. Okay? Like we did in Boracay. Di ba? Kaya pangita ko sa dinto naghalin ng mga effluents nga gina-release, di wala naman sa bungsang higko. Di ba? Because sustainable. Amo ng punto nga sustainable. Like, for example, in Metro Manila, kapagwa kita sa tanan nga higko, da sa tubig, sa Pasig, tinga kadto na Manila Bay. So, ano nang karon ng matabo? Of course, baski na pa tinlo, tas ang Manila Bay, may higko, nagyapon, because ang puno, wala gintinlo. Wala gin-act ang rules sang aton yung environmental policy makers para dira. Okay? Also, like for example, we have mining firms nga tanan malang ginapagwa nato na da. Ginakadto nato niya sa ginapagwa dito sa bodies of water. Okay? With heavy metals. Di ko makaon na may inom sang tawo bi. Oh. So what will happen sa pangabuhian sang tawo? Kay tungod maging acidic ang parts sang lupa nilang ginapaagyan sang waste materials sa mining. Muna isa ka epekto. So dapat we must manage these things. Occupational risk inherent to industries due to that of use of hazardous materials. Yan. Sa mga occupational, so dapat we must be protected by that. Kung kung industriya, nga nakakatabo is that nga, ang mga tao, halalang niya ka paobra, pero wala ka ginaprotektahan. So, ano na lang na sila matabo sa ulihi? Diba? Next, we have concepts on the principles of sustainable development. It operates on the principle of indivisible world. Environmental problems cross national boundaries. In such phenomena are acid rain and global warming. Global warming, usual. It does not mean economic stagnation or giving up economy growth for the sake of the environment. Yan. Dapat hindi siya mag-una ang economy nga 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 maepektuhan ang aton ng environment. It should even promote economic development as a requisite for maintaining environmental quality. And that's the main purpose ng ginhambang ko kagina ni Gina Lopez. We must protect our environment first and try to augment that para sa economy naton. That is the main purpose of Gina Lopez. Nga hindi naton ibaylo ang aton natural resources, our environment, in exchange of that economy. Kaya kung pwede malang naton niya gamiton tang aton natural resources, our environment, in increasing our economy. And that's the main purpose. Dapat. Hindi nga ngagubon ta aton environment para for the sake of that economy. Dapat i-maintain ta nga balance. Manami economy naton, manami man environment ta. Paano ta obrahon? Ang aton economy dapat ma-rely sa aton tong environment. Kay kung rich ang aton environment, manami ang aton environment, we can use it as ecotourism or a source of other materials nga para makasustain sa economy. And that is the work of the government that we are not that we are trying to explain. And that's the work of the government nga i-sustain kag i-maintain na siya ang aton environmental quality. I-maintain na siya para sa good economy. Okay, because we believe, Gina Lopez believe, that environment is very important in maintaining a good economy. Okay? It is concerned with the attainment of social equity and the promotion of lifestyle, values, and technologies which reflect concern for the earth, humanity, and future generations. So the essence of sustainable development is the harmonious integration of sound and viable economy, responsible governance, social cohesion and harmony, and ecological integrity to ensure that development is a life-enhancing process. So these are very important. Dapat sila tanan connected. Hindi dapat in expense of this, amo ni ang manami. Okay? So dapat level sila tanan. Dapat they are in harmonious integration of a sound and viable economy, governance, social aspects, and ecological aspects to attain the sustainable development. At the level of the individuals and communities sa aton kag sa aton komunidad, sustainable development is a process focused on people and society, how they define needs with reference to their own goals and the goals they share as members of communities and nations. It is in contrast to development that focus on resource exploitation to generate short-term wealth. That means this is actually the cooperation of individual para sa isa ka komunidad. So, sustainable development, nakafocus na siya on the individual, how to help the individual to produce goods, and this good will be shared to the community, or each member of the community will produce a goods that are, of course, not destroying our environment at all, again, and these products of the community will be shared to other communities also, so that it will maintain the good economy. It will maintain or sharing of resources from individual to individual and community to another communities. Amo na siya. In exchange, of course, sang wala sa ila. And that is sustainable development. One in the sustainable development. Okay? Now, here, we have the assessment. So I want you to focus based on your understanding of the lecture. Number one, list various benefits of environmental education in green technology education for sustainable development. Okay? Ang nakita nyo tanan-tanan nga benepisyo sa environmental education and green technology education para sa aton nga sustainable development. So, amo na siya ang answeran. At the same time, have a self-reflection. So, in this lesson, I learned that sugpunan nyo na lang na siya. A minimum of 200 words. Okay? 200 words. Actually, this presentation is um, the main purpose of this presentation, of this video presentation, is to augment with the lecture. Okay? With the lecture nga ara sa module. Kay kung nagabasa ka lang, kung kisa wala man damil. That is why I wanted to have this video presentation for you to help. Okay? But if you have questions and clarifications, we can have the forum in our Facebook, and it will be graded. Okay? And also in the Google Classroom. Okay? So, I'll be lenient with the outputs nga kinanglan nyo nga ipasa. Okay? Kay I know that all of us are experiencing problems in this time of pandemic. Hindi lang man kamo ang nabudlayan, kami man ang nabudlayan. But of course, we are trying our very best to reach you and to provide a reliable and a good learning experience even we are apart. But still, communication is still there. Okay? So that ends my presentation, hoping that you've learned something from it. And if you have questions, just contact me in our official LMS, and at the same time, other platforms that you can contact, like my email, Telegram, Messenger, and Facebook. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully that this presentation will be used by yours for learning regarding with our first lesson. Thank you very much, and God bless everyone.